Well, welcome everybody. As always, there's a prayer on top of your handout. It's a long one today because this is a long story. I try to give you the full thing. But let us pray. O Lord our God, in these dark times we desire Samson-like strength to destroy those we perceive as enemies. But Lord, we know in our hearts this is not what you desire for us. May we be not like Samson, who used the gifts and strengths you gave him not to deliver your people, but rather to serve his own lust for power and sex and revenge. Rather, O Lord, we ask you to fill us with your Spirit, to give us your gifts, and most of all, to transform us such that we would be like Jesus, living witnesses of your gospel, who live lives full of love for you, O God, and for our neighbors, especially the poor and oppressed, whom you love. May your loving kindness and faithfulness characterize our lives such that we would be beacons of hope who shine brightly in this dark, sinful world. Amen. Okay. Samson. We all know this story. It's a fun story, right? It's Cecil B. DeMille made a movie, Samson and Delilah, 1949. In 1950, it was the largest grossing film. It was nominated for 5 Academy Awards. It won 2. There's a reason. This is a good story, right? It's got everything good stories have. It's got violence, romance, sex, humor. It's actually quite R-rated humor, right? But it's got all those things, right? And it makes what makes for a good story, right? By the way, the film isn't very accurate to the story, but it draws on all of those themes, right? But this is it's a story we all know. We've heard it. Though I'm going to present it in a way which you might be surprised. That should be obvious from the prayer, and I put some quotes on the first page of my handout. I'm not going to treat Samson like a hero, because he's not. He's a bad guy, right? But getting our heads around him well, no comment. But that's actually not a bad comparison in certain ways, right? So one of the first things I think we should, obviously don't have time to read all of this. We don't ever really have that time. But this is a long story. It's the longest story in the book of Judges, right? So yes, we get a lot more in other books about, let's say, Abraham or Isaac or King David, but comparatively, this is a figure we get a very long story about, right? If you read the whole story, you'll find all kinds of things in common with other Bible stories, right? So, if I was teaching a class, I haven't actually ever taught a class on Judges to students who I have to give a grade to, but if I was, the final exam would have this question on it. Compare the Samson story to other major judges, and tell me how the Samson story breaks the pattern of all the other ones. So I'm going to answer it for you because it's kind of a hard question. But if you read the other stories, there's this pattern. Israel does what is evil in God's sight. God hands them over to their enemies, usually the Philistines. They're oppressed. Israel finally cries out and asks for God's help. God sends a judge. That pattern repeats over and over and over again, right? This doesn't happen here. The pattern breaks, and actually it's going to break for the whole book, right? What happens here is, if you look at chapter 13, verse 1, Israel again did what was evil on the side of the Lord, and the Lord gave them over to the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. First 2 parts of that pattern are there. Third part doesn't ever appear. Israel doesn't ever cry out. Things are so bad, they're so far gone, they've forgotten about God. That's actually what this is telling us, right? They don't cry out. They don't ask God for help. In fact, in chapter 15, they actually say, the Philistines are the rulers of us. They don't even protest it anymore. They just accepted this as not true. So who raises up the judge? God does. So God helps them even when they don't ask for help, right? And we get this, so this is, the pattern is broken. God has to raise up the judge. And Samson does do some things that help deliver them, but it's only ever partial. In fact, if you look at chapter 13, verse 5, actually we'll look at verse 4, we get this whole thing of he has to take a vow, like they're going to dedicate him to God. Even his mom can't drink wine or strong drink or eat anything unclean. For you shall conceive and bear a son, and a razor is coming on his head, for the boy will be a Nazarite to God from birth. It is he who shall begin to deliver Israel from the hand of the Philistines. All the other ones, the judges do deliver Israel. He just begins to do it. Everything he does is incomplete. Right? Again, if you've read the story, you just heard a sermon on it. I don't know what's in a sermon. I haven't heard it yet. But my hunch is he's gonna paint a Samson as not an ideal figure, right? If we compare though a Samson to Israel in this story, Samson comes off as a saint. Israel's worse.
Oh my
right.
goodness.
That's part of what's actually part of what's happening in the story is, I mean, he's the judge. He's the one that God has set apart, right? God has a plan for Samson. Samson doesn't really cooperate. God uses him anyway, right? But everybody else is worse. So we'll come back to this, right? But this pattern is just broken. Israel doesn't even ask for help anymore. God helps them anyway, right? And things are going to get worse after this in the book of Judges. No one is called a judge anymore. Things are so bad. Israel goes to civil war. The way they treat people gets even worse than in this story, right? It just gets worse and worse and worse, right? So if we look at his birth, right, I just read a bit of that to you, right? This angel comes, and if we're reading this in Hebrew, we don't know if it's an angel or a messenger, which words are the same. The guy comes, the wife is barren. You've heard this pattern before, right? A messenger angel tells her, you will conceive and bear a son. There's some conditions here. Don't drink wine or a strong drink. Good advice for any pregnant woman, right? Don't eat unclean. He's going to be a Nazarite vow. We not pick up on what that is, but if you're a Jew at this time, right, and if you know your Old Testament well, this is a vow a person can make in order to, for a period of time, be set aside. The very word Nazarite means to be set aside, to be consecrated, to be holy. You're going to act extra holy for a while. And the rules for it are, don't consume anything made out of grapes. You can't even eat the seeds. You can't use grapeseed oil even, right? Nothing. You can't touch any of it. You can't cut your hair. And you can't touch or even come near dead bodies, right? We all know the hair part, right? But those other things are important too. And I notice what Samson does all the time. He kills people, right? He's not supposed to even come near a dead body. He's making the dead bodies, right? Problem number one, right? How does he oftentimes kill these bodies? What's the famous story? He kills 1,000 Philistines with a what? Jaw of a donkey. It says it's a fresh jawbone, right? So animals count, right? He kills a lion by tearing it apart. Then there's a beehive in the carcass, right? All these things he's doing are actually he's breaking this vow. So it isn't just the hair.
What about horses?
I don't catch the horse.
He said corpses.
Corpses. Yeah, he can't touch a corpse, right? Yeah, sorry. Sorry.
I was confused.
Okay. I wasn't very clear, right?
Yeah, they did show that on the choirs.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, and actually, the other thing is, like, he's also, if you get him to his mom can't eat anything unclean, right? When he kills this lion and eats honey out of it, a lion is an unclean animal. can't eat it. One of the rules is you can't eat a 4-footed animal with pads on its foot. So cats and dogs are out. You can't eat them. Good. Right? Yeah. And there's things there too, right? I mean, it's all these rules. And so he's flaunting these things all the time. Where does he kill the lion? I think someone answered it. Yep, so it's on the bottom of the, should be on the bottom of the first page. It's on chapter 14, verse 5. Samson went down to his father and mother to Timnah. When he came to the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a lion roared at him. What's he doing in a vineyard? Right? Right. They go down to a wedding party. Like he's going to get married. He sees this Philistine girl. He goes down to the wedding, right? And they have a 7-day party. What do you think you're doing at a 7-day party? What? He's stupid. Oh, this is the other thing. Like, I mean, again, there's actually only, there's a couple, but there's really only 2 smart people in the whole story. Delilah. There's one other one.
His first wife.
Not his first wife. Well, she's kind of, but there's like another, actually the smartest person in the story. The only real hero in the story. We don't even get her a name.
Yahweh.
Well, there's God, of course, but we don't. His mom. All the men in this story are stupid. Every single one. Every single one. Samson's in, I mean, the whole story of Samson and Delilah. I mean, if you pause and say this isn't a Bible story, and just read it, he's so incredibly dumb, right? I mean, it's obvious what she's trying to do. She flat out asks him, how could we tie you up so that your strength goes away? Right? Well, that could also be part of it. There's some like a sexual thing here, right? But I mean, every time, like, and then like she ties him up, and she says, hey, the Philistines are here, and they actually are. And he still keeps answering her, right? I mean, it's portrayed in a way that we're supposed to think he's dumb, like it's silly, right? In the beginning of the story, right? Rather than the Philistines calling out, there's this guy named Samson's dad named Manoah. He has a wife who's barren. An angel appears to her, tells her she's going to get pregnant. She tells her husband, a man came to me. His appearance was like that of an angel, most awe-inspiring. I didn't ask where he came from. He didn't tell me his name. He said, you will conceive a son, right? He says, well, if he comes back, tell me. He does come back, right? And they talk to him for a while, and they build a fire to offer a sacrifice to God, and the messenger like goes up in the flame. And they're like, he was an angel. Right? And all of a sudden the dad goes, wait a minute, we just saw the face of God. We're going to die. Right? And how does the wife respond again? We don't even get her name. This is chapter 13, verse 23. So on page 2 of the handout, about 2/3 of the way down. But his wife said to him, if the Lord had meant to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering at our hands, or shown us all these things, or announced that these things were here. She's basically like, if God wanted to destroy us, he wouldn't have taken all this time to talk to us, right? I mean, she's smart, right? Everybody else in the story is dumb, right? Samson's dumb, his dad is dumb, right? The Philistine men are dumb, right? But I mean, and that's basically part of the story is nobody is faithful. One of the big themes here that was going to get introduced after the Samson story is Israel didn't have that time. Everybody did what was right in their own eyes. Right? And when Samson first gets married here and says, hey, I went down to the Philistine lands. What's he doing there anyway? He's not supposed to be there. Right? He wants to marry this girl. He's just seen. He hasn't even talked to her. Tells his parents, get her for me. They protest and say, can't you find Israelite girl, right? And he says, no, I want her. He goes, and the text usually gets translated, she was pleasing to his eye, but what it actually says is, she is right to my eyes. It's a play on words with that other phrase of everybody did what was right in their own eyes. Like, he's the first one who says, I'm going to do what I think is best.
And the title of was son-in-law's The Eyes.
Yeah. So, and this is what happens, right? And it's just going to get. So he's like a stand-in for Israel. He's doing what he thinks is the right, and actually Israel's far worse. Again, as a nation, they're going to be even worse, right? But this is the theme, right? And that actually this gets him into big trouble, right? So he goes down, he kills that lion. He comes back. There's honey in the lion. He eats it. He goes to this feast for his own wedding. He tells a riddle. I'm going to find the riddle. It's on page 3 of this very long story, right? So they're at a wedding. They're playing a game. And Samson tells a riddle, and he says, if you can answer it, I'll give each of you a pair of fine clothes. Right? There's 30 companions. Basically, there's 30 Philistines who got invited to his wedding, perhaps to keep tabs on him, right? Samson's doing everything wrong here. He's hanging out with Philistines. He's marrying a foreign woman. He's at a party where he's drinking. He's not supposed to be doing any of these things, right?
Regular teenager.
Right. And that's kind of like, it is the teenager whose cortex hasn't developed. He's doing everything wrong, right? So he tells them this riddle, right? And by the way, this is going to be a little R-rated, right? So out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. Now, it's an unfair riddle, right? Have you ever seen or read the book Lord of the Rings? Right? Bilbo and Gollum. Bilbo says, what's in my pocket? Has the riddle at the end. So that's not a riddle. A riddle is something you should be able to figure out using logic. He tells the same kind of a thing, right? It's because the answer is the line in the honey, right? No one knows the answer to this except him. So that's not fair. The Philistines realize this, and that's why they're trying to get revenge. He's not being fair. They're not going to be fair back, right? But they're trying to figure out the answer. We're at a wedding. What could possible answers be if you use a logic to try to answer this? Eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. One possible answer. What? A B. So it could be this sort of thing, but we're at a wedding. We're having a 7-day party. What are you doing at a 7-day party? Drinking. What happens if you drink too much? You get drunk, and then what happens if you keep drinking? What? Well, other things. What comes out of you? One possible answer to this riddle is vomit. Right? It's out of the strong came something like you drink too much, you throw up. The other one is, and this is actually probably the appropriate one, it's a sexual innuendo. You have a sex. The man ejaculates. Right, that's what those are the expected answers, but no, it's a lion and honey, right? It's a trick. They realize this. They approach his wife. Now we've got a problem, right? These are two people who are at odds, the Philistines and the Hebrews. Samson marries a Philistine woman. Where is her loyalty? But it's also to him, like she's torn.
But she doesn't know him.
She doesn't really know him at all, right? In fact, it says she cries for 7 days here, right? Trying to get the answer out of him, right? He finally gives in. By the way, it's a preview of what's going to happen with Delilah. The same pattern repeats. But she gives in. She gives them the answer. They give it to him. He gets angry. He goes to a different Philistine city, kills 30 guys, takes their clothes, gives it to them, right? So he gets revenge, right? And then his wife, because he just takes off because he's angry, gets given to someone else.
His best man.
his best man, when it's kind of thing. But it's a Philistine, right? It's not a fellow Hebrew, right? So that happens. Finally, he comes back. He brings a goat, a kid goat, to kind of make amends, right? Saying sorry. It's not a very good apology. And he gets there. He finds out she's been given to someone else. The dad tries to bargain with him and say, "Well, I've got a younger daughter. She's even prettier. Poor women are getting used as just pawns in this, right?" He gets angry, right? Now, if we recall, the Philistines threatened his wife and her father that they would be burned up if they didn't give her the answer. Give them the answer to the riddle. What does Samson do? I mean, he does this kind of extreme thing, right? He catches 300 foxes, right? He's like a trickster, right? Ties their tails together, ties a torch between each pair, and sets them loose, right? By the way, here's a hint for reading the Bible. So chapter 15, I'm on page 3 of my handout. It says, after a while, at the time of the wheat harvest, Samson went to visit his wife, right? These little details in here are important. Why is the fact that it's the wheat harvest important?
It's going to get burned up.
It's going to get burned up, right? And they're giving us a detail of the wheat is ready to harvest. And now there's foxes with tails on fire running through the fields.
I'll be Zachary. That really happened.
That really happened, right? But this is the point, right? I mean, he's going to burn down all the wheat fields. So this is overkill, right? But notice he doesn't just burn down the wheat fields, right? So if you look at chapter 15, verse 5, when he had set fire to the torches, he let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines and burned up the shocks and the standing grain, as well as the vineyards and olive groves. So he doesn't just ruin 1 year of work. He ruins decades of work. Vineyards and olive groves burned down. Right? I mean, he hasn't just taken away people's harvest for a year. He's destroyed their livelihoods. The fact that they want to now kill him is not overkill, right? But we've now got this Hatfield McCoy thing going on. You did this to me, I'm going to do this to you. But Samson is just way over the top every time.
It's still going on today.
Oh, absolutely, right? But it's
I have a question. Right at the beginning of 15, after a while, at the time of the wheat harvest, Samson went to visit his wife.
Yeah.
Now, how long was that?
We don't know. It doesn't tell us, but it's after a while, right? I mean, so
I'm saying Mary just got married. It wasn't consummated.
Yeah, right.
And now he
takes off because he's angry. He lost the riddle. He's got to go pay it. So what does he do? He goes and kills 30 guys, and he's angry. So again, how does he respond when they answer the riddle? What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? So by the way, they're teasing him. They answer it in the form of a question, which is how you answer a riddle if it's a real riddle, right? But they're basically saying, hey, we figured it out. We got the answer. And how does he answer? If you hadn't plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have found out my riddle, right? So he's basically accusing his wife of being unfaithful. And he takes off, right? Yes, he comes back. So there's some confusion here of, does he think they're married? Obviously, because she and her dad didn't, because she got married to someone else. But yeah, he comes, and what does it say? He says, I want to go to my wife's room. I mean, what's on his mind, right? I mean, want to consummate the marriage, right? And she married somebody else because you disappeared, right? I thought surely you had rejected her, right? And it does sound like he did, right? He's a hothead. Right? He gets angry and he leaves. So now he overreacts. He burns down all of these things, right? The Philistines ask, who has done this? They say, Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he has taken Samson's wife and given her to his companions. So what do? The Philistines do go and kill her and her father. They burn them, right?
Who did they get to play Samson in the movie? Victor Richard.
Yes. It's Hedi lo Hamar is Delilah. Yep. So they do burn it, right? The Philistines came up and burned her, and her father Samson says, if this is what you do, I swear I will not stop till I'm taking revenge on you. So we've got this back and forth, right? We've now got a cycle of revenge, right? He comes down. He says we get this weird phrase. He struck them down hip and thigh with a Hamas. So he beats up a whole bunch of them, right? They respond and they come and raid Judah. So basically they go, we can't catch him. We're going to go kill some Israelites. Right? Things have really not gotten out of hand. Samson's supposed to be delivering Israel. He's now getting them into trouble. Right? He's actually getting them killed, right? So here we get this phrase, they go down and raid this a city in Judah, the tribe of Judah. These men say, why have you come up against us? They say, we've come to get Samson. So then the tribe of Judah goes to get him, and they say, do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us? Why then have you done this to us? So they just say, we're conquered by them. We're not going to get out of this. God's not going to help us. They've forgotten about God. Right, and they said, why have you done this? And he said, as they did to me, so I've done to them, right? So he says, swear to me, they go, we're going to take you. He says, fine, you can tie me up, but don't hurt me, basically. So they do, right? He's going like this. He's all tied up. He gets to the Philistines, and of course, then this power comes on him, and he breaks free. He kills 1,000 Philistines with a jawbone, right? By the way, there's a joke here, right? They're in the town of Lehi. Lehi just means a jawbone. So he goes to a town called jawbone and finds a jawbone and beats up a bunch of Philistines with a jawbone, right?
Is there any other implications of that?
No, it's just, it's a funny. Like the town is named jawbone, right? And so he beats, and the other joke here is the word for a donkey and the word for heap are pronounced the same. So if you look at verse 16, and Samson said, with the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey, I have slain 1,000 men. It means that you could watch what it's like. There's two things being said at the same time, right? I killed a bunch of guys with a donkey's jawbone and piled them in a pile, right? Piled them in a heap. The word heap also means donkey, says, so he's made a pile of Philistines. That's meaning number one. He's turned the Philistines into a pile of asses, is meaning number two. Like he's saying both things at the same time, right? It's a wordplay, right?
Do we know who wrote this?
Right. But I mean, somebody's having fun. There's fun wordplays, which you can't pull into English. There isn't any way to get because it's about a sound, right? It's you would hear it. So again, we've got this terrible thing. He beats up all of these guys, right? What does he do afterwards? So he's just killed 1,000 guys with a jawbone.
He goes to see a prostitute.
Well, he's going to do that, but there's something he does right in between, right? He's thirsty. He's worn out. Thirsty. I just beat up 1,000 guys. I'm tired now, right? And he goes. This is what he says to God. By the way, this is the first time he talks to God in the whole story. He prays for the first time and says, "You, O God, have granted this great victory by the hand of your servant. Am I now to die of thirst and fall in the hands of the uncircumcised?" Like he's just like, "Hey God, give me a drink here." And God answers him, right? At this point, so God opens up a hollow in the rock and water comes out, right? It sounds like Moses in the wilderness when he hits something on a stick, right? Moses gets in trouble for that. That's why he can't enter the promised land. But we also have like Gideon earlier who like asked God over and over and over again to like prove it. So God's having patience here. You finally talk to me. You complain. Okay, I'll give you a drink. Maybe we'll get something going here. You should try talking to me more often, maybe, right?
Another play on words I noticed, when he drank, the Spirit returned.
Yeah, I mean, so this idea of the Spirit of God's in him, but he's also tired, right? So yeah, there's some...
You have to think how Al thinks. Spirit.
Oh, yes, okay. I did not catch that. Right. So then he does go. He's right after a while. So we get a story kind of ending, right? Of he beats up all these guys. It's a big deal. He's killed 1,000 Philistines. He was a judge in the land for 20 years, right? Kind of, right? But then what does he do? He goes and sees a prostitute. What's he doing? Right? He's not supposed to be doing this. Again, he's had this vow. Yeah. Right. And they lay a trap for him. So again, he goes to a Philistine country. They know he's there. They block the gate. They're going to wait for him to get up in the morning, and they're going to catch him. He gets up earlier. He lifts the city gate out of their frame, carries it to the top of a hill, plants it, and walks off. Right? I mean, it's almost now the story is getting ridiculous, right? But he exposes now this whole town. Their gates are gone. Anybody can walk in, right? So he's doing things to just anger the Philistines, right? I mean, so at this point, we've got this character of he's supposed to be delivering Israel from the Philistines, but he's not really interested in this. He's interested in Philistine women and getting revenge, right? From any petty little thing. He's always way over the top, right? He doesn't care what anybody else thinks. He does his own thing. He does occasionally kind of help, but not really, right? So then, right, he finally, after he visits a prostitute and has this whole thing, he meets Delilah. And he said...
She had a prostitute before?
Before, yeah. She's not, we're not ever told she's a prostitute. That's kind of what people have assumed, right? But he meets Delilah, and it says he fell in love with her, right? That's the first time, it actually does kind of hint he isn't only into her for the sex. He actually cares for her, right? He's in love with her, but she's not going to trick him, right?
Well, as we know, there are many words for love.
Yeah. But it just says love. It just says love here, right? It doesn't. So we don't know, but he seems to be taken with her at least, right? She lives in the valley of Sorek. What do you think this town is famous for?
Wine.
What? Wine. They are. That's exactly right. It's famous for vineyards. So why is he there, right? He meets the girl, right? And actually this town is right on the border of Israel and the Philistine lands, right? So we don't actually ever know where Delilah is. Whose team is she on? She's on her own team. That's kind of the answer, right? But so is Samson, right? But we don't know if she's a Philistine or if she's a Hebrew. We don't know who she is, right? And actually, her name could be both. This is on purpose. She's this figure in the middle, right? And so the lords of the Philistines come. It's not just the people of this town who are angry at him. Now the leaders of the Philistines are after him. There's a bony on his head. Things have gotten serious, right? I know they can't catch him because the power of the Spirit's going to come on him. He's going to beat up all these people. They've got to somehow trick him, right? So they say here, coax him and get the answer out of him, and they offer her a ridiculous amount of money. I mean, it's extreme. They say each of them will give us 1,100 pieces of silver, right? And we don't actually know how many there are. Let's say there's a 6. Right? That's a huge amount. Earlier in Numbers, it was 30 pieces of silver. By the way, this also explains Judas. 30 pieces of silver is how much you need to free a slave. So do the math. I mean, she's got enough money here to buy a small army of slaves, right? I mean, it's a ridiculous sum. It's like hundreds of millions of dollars, right? She says, okay. Right. I mean, it's a ridiculous amount, right? I mean, it's exaggerated. Like, probably wasn't this much silver in all the land, right? So he tells her this series of lies, right? I mean, she, again, flat out says, what can we do to stop you? If I tie you up in a certain way, we'll take away your strength, right? And he tells her all these different answers. Every time the Philistines are here, he instantly breaks his bonds, right? And she keeps at him and says, you don't really love me. You're making a mockery of me. He finally gives in and tells her, well, my hair has never been cut, which is what we all focus on, right? But doesn't mean that just because his hair is cut, his strength is going to disappear. He's violated this vow hundreds of times now, right? It's that he clearly doesn't think God's ever going to do anything. He just thinks God has ever punished me. God hasn't ever taken away anything from me. He's always with me when I need him, right? Every time the Philistines come, I can beat them up, right? But he's just now openly said, God clearly doesn't care. I could tell this woman to cut my hair and it doesn't matter, right? And when his hair is cut, the final symbol that he's a Nazarite who God has set aside is gone. And with that gone, God leaves him. So it isn't just because he cut his hair, it's because he just keeps flaunting the fact that he just says, God's going to be with me no matter what I do. It doesn't matter, right? So, right, so he loses his hair, God leaves him, he gets captured, they pluck out his eyes, right? He now has to be a slave, right? In fact, what is he doing? Grinding wheat. That's women's work. Women grind wheat, not men. And so they're making him do women's work. So he's being humiliated, right?
Is scooping out your eyes a common punishment?
It's really the only time this happens. But I mean, it's supposed to weaken him. He can't now see his enemies to fight them.
Those that he lusts.
Right. Or there's all these things that he sees. That's been taken away. It's clear imagery, right? Yeah. I mean, they may have, but it's a form of torture, right? So then he prays for only a second time. What does he pray? God, remember me. So here we get a little bit of covenant language. He says, God, remember me, which is better than anything Israel has done. He's the only one who calls out and asks for God's help. He finally, at the very end, asks for God's help, right? And says, give me strength, right? Not, though, to save Israel, but to get revenge for his eyes, right? It's purely personal. But he does actually call out to God, right? And then we all know what happens. He pushes down the pillars, and there's probably 10,000 people here, right? So it's now as if Philistine has lost this huge battle, and men and women and children are all killed. Israel's kind of delivered, right? But the expense is huge, right? And the judge now is purely selfish. He's out for his own case, just like everybody else is, right?
Does that kill him as well?
Yeah, he dies, right? He dies, and he basically pushes the building over, and it falls on everybody, including him, right? And he does commit a suicide. He says, "Let me die with the Philistines," right? It's not a good story, right? It's entertaining for sure, right? So what do we do with it, right? Go ahead, Betty. Well, that's what we should ask. What is the story actually telling us, right?
Well, I think it's telling us that they're human, we're human, and God will be with us no matter what.
Yeah. So again, we do get a couple pockets of faithfulness from human actors, like Samson, him messed up at the end, his mother, right? But part of what we're being told is the real faithful one here is God. God keeps being faithful to Israel, even when Israel has forgotten God and fails to call out. So that's part of the hope here, is God's faithful when we not only aren't faithful, but are intentionally unfaithful. Bob.
So I think it was Bill commented about Judges, and that it had less to do with God and more with the question of whether Israel needed a king. But God wasn't really happy that they wanted to go the king route either. So is the book of Judges supposed to show that Judges didn't work either, or?
I think part of what's happening with the Judges is God is trying to tell Israel, you don't need a ruler. I'm your ruler. Follow me, right? But from time to time, you need someone. I need to raise someone else to help you. And it's because of this pattern of you guys do what is evil. Basically, God says, I'm not going to make you obey. I'm going to tell you how you should live. If you don't, there's consequences. I'm going to hand you over. And then they call out. They say, God, help us. God says, okay, I'll come help you. He raises someone up. This person gets them back into order. Ideally, then they don't need a judge. But the pattern keeps happening, right? And so finally now we get to the end, and there's definitely a voice in the story that's saying, maybe we should try having a king who would give us order, right? And that's actually in the Hebrew Bible, the Jewish Bible, the order, Ruth isn't next. It goes Joshua, Judges, Samuel. And Ruth is here because it's a story that's set in this time, though it's written way afterwards. But just real quick, Betty. So then we get to Samuel. Samuel, in a sense, is the last judge. He's good, but what does he do? He gets Israel to have a king. They're going to try this other way, right? But it's always, when Israel gives their attention to a human leader rather than God, there's problems, right? But part of the story really is God saying, I'm the one who's faithful, depend on me, right? I'm going to be the one who leads you.
Isn't the story of Samson really just telling people that you can do anything you want because God's always going to forgive you, so just live it up, do what
But I think it isn't doing that, because look what happens to Samson.
well,
right? And if we keep reading in this story, it's going to get worse for Israel too, right? So it is saying, like, God is saying, I'm going to keep with you. There's not going to be consequences though for your.
in the meantime.
But so he's calling them to repent, right? And people die. Israelites die here too, right? There's going to be consequences for your actions. God says, I won't force you to obey. I will punish you. There will be consequences, right? But I'm going to keep faithful. Have hope that I'm going to get you out of these bad situations, though it's not always going to be pretty, right? But that's actually the hope in the story, is God's the faithful one always. Even when it isn't only that we just kind of don't do the right thing, it's that we intentionally don't do the right thing.
I don't always trust you.
Well, there's that too, right? But and again, like, what's happening here is every character is being depicted as they do what they think is best, rather than listening to what God is telling them.
But they're doing what is best
For them, and also for themselves, right? Whereas, again, if you think about the pattern, the judges get raised up and they save Israel, right? They go out and help everybody else, right? They arrest oppression, right? But what constantly happens is Israel is turning into the oppressors. And that's the word to us too, is, right, we're actually supposed to, like, care for our neighbors rather than figure out what's best for us.
Absolute power.
Right. Oh, yeah, I mean, it's all of this, right? So that's what's happening here, right? And again, you can see the story. I mean, if you're reading it as an oppressed Israelite, you might be humored by the idea there's this strong man who's going to beat up our enemies, right? But then you also see, but things aren't that great still. We got to do something better than this. Right?
A whole bunch of innocent people.
Right, exactly, right. So that's this story. It's not a good story. Well, I mean, I actually think we ought to feel bad for them here. I mean, Samson